Let's dive into the life and music of Dmitri Shostakovich, a composer shrouded in as much mystery as the Soviet Union he lived in.
Indeed, his life was a tapestry woven with both extraordinary musical achievements and the harsh realities of living under totalitarian rule.
So we'll be looking at biographical excerpts.
That's right, they give us a glimpse into this fascinating and often turbulent life.
To start, let's go back to his beginnings in St. Petersburg.
Born in 1906, Shostakovich entered a world where political and social upheaval were the norm.
Sounds like a challenging time to be alive.
It certainly was. His family had roots in Polish revolutionary movements, and this instilled in him a sense of defiance.
A sense of defiance that would later come through in his music.
Exactly. And his musical talent was evident very early on.
I've heard stories about his memory.
Absolutely. There are fascinating anecdotes about his extraordinary ability to remember music.
Like how so?
He could reportedly recreate entire pieces after hearing them only once.
Really just one listen.
Almost like a living, breathing musical encyclopedia.
That's incredible to have such an innate grasp of music at such a young age.
And this natural ability paved the way for his formal training at 13. He entered the prestigious Petrograd Conservatory.
An institution steeped in musical tradition.
Precisely a very intense environment for someone so young.
So how did he handle it?
He thrived by 19. He was not only conducting Beethoven's First Symphony,
That's impressive.
but also premiering his own First Symphony to considerable acclaim.
Powerful start.
But it also marked the beginning of his complex relationship with the Soviet authorities.
His rise to fame coincided with a period of increasing artistic control under Stalin.
Precisely, the 1930s and the Soviet Union saw a tightening grip on artistic expression.
So the government began to dictate.
What was acceptable, what served the ideology of the state, and what was considered dangerous.
And Shostakovich's opera, Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk, landed him right in the middle of this ideological battle.
It did.
But initially, the opera was a huge success.
Yes, it was lauded by critics and audiences alike, hailed as a triumph of Soviet art.
What happened?
Stalin himself attended a performance.
Oh, this doesn't sound good.
Shortly after Stalin's independence, a scathing article appeared in Pravda.
The official newspaper of the Communist Party.
That's right. It denounced Lady Macbeth as muddle instead of music,
Muddle instead of music.
a work filled with bourgeois decadence and unacceptable dissonance.
The impact of this denunciation on Shostakovich must have been immense.
It was a turning point. Artistic expression was now subservient to the dictates of the state.
Every note he composed would be scrutinized.
Exactly. He faced the very real threat of arrest.
And so he withdrew his Fourth Symphony.
Yes. Fearing further reprisals, he considered the symphony quite personal.
It must have been a terrifying time for him. This was during the height of the Great Terror.
It was. The purges and executions were happening all around him.
There was so much fear and uncertainty.
One of his closest friends, Marshal Mikhail Tukhachevsky,
A prominent military leader.
was executed. Others close to him were imprisoned, their lives shattered by the paranoia of the regime.
Shostakovich was living under a cloud of suspicion. His artistic freedom severely curtailed.
It was a dark time.
Let's pause here and delve further into how Shostakovich navigated this perilous period in our next segment.
It was a time of great uncertainty for Shostakovich, walking a tightrope, trying to appease the authorities while staying true to his musical vision.
How did he compose under such immense pressure?
His Fifth Symphony, premiered in 1937, offers a fascinating glimpse into his mindset.
During this period,
Many interpret this symphony as a direct response to the denunciation of Lady Macbeth.
musically, how does it reflect this response?
On the surface, it adopts a more traditional, almost neoclassical style. The harmonies are simpler, the melodies more lyrical.
So he was creating music that was accessible and emotionally uplifting, something that wouldn't be perceived as challenging or subversive.
Precisely. But beneath this veneer of conformity, there are undercurrents of something deeper, perhaps even defiant.
Like what?
The symphony's finale, while outwardly triumphant, has a certain ambiguity to it. Some listeners hear it as a forced celebration, a hollow victory.
Is there a way to know what Shostakovich truly intended with this symphony?
It's difficult to say for certain. He was incredibly guarded about his true intentions, often speaking in riddles or using ambiguous language when discussing his work. This ambiguity, however, is part of what makes his music so compelling. It invites multiple interpretations, allowing us to hear both the public facade and the private struggles beneath.
The war years brought a new set of challenges and inspirations for Shostakovich. He remained in Leningrad during the Nazi siege, a harrowing experience that profoundly shaped his music.
Indeed, deemed unfit for military service, he contributed to the war effort as a firefighter and even composed a piece for the Leningrad militia. Imagine composing music amidst the constant bombardments and the threat of starvation.
His Seventh Symphony, also known as the Leningrad Symphony, emerged from this experience. It became a symbol of defiance, a testament to the human spirit's resilience in the face of unimaginable suffering.
The symphony's first movement, written while Leningrad was still under siege, depicts the invasion of the city by Nazi forces. It's a relentless musical onslaught, a sonic representation of the horrors of war. The remaining movements completed after Shostakovich and his family were evacuated to Kribyshev capture the city's determination, its refusal to surrender to despair.
The Seventh Symphony premiered in Kuybyshev, then in Moscow and other Soviet cities. It even reached Allied nations, where it was performed to great acclaim, becoming a powerful symbol of the global fight against fascism.
It's remarkable to consider the impact of this symphony. It transcended geographical borders and political ideologies, speaking to something universal about the human experience in times of crisis.
Even as he was lauded for his wartime compositions, Shostakovich continued to face personal tragedies. He lost close friends, and his first wife, Nina, passed away in 1938.
And as the war ended, a new wave of political repression swept across the Soviet Union.
In 1948, he was once again denounced for formalism, this time under the Zhdanov Decree. This decree targeted artists and intellectuals who were deemed to be promoting Western influences and deviating from the principles of socialist realism.
This denunciation was a devastating blow. Shostakovich was dismissed from his teaching position at the Moscow Conservatory and faced financial hardship as his music was once again banned from being performed. The echoes of the campaign against Lady Macbeth were undeniable.
How did he navigate this second wave of denunciation?
He resorted to a strategy of composing on two fronts publicly. He created works that adhered to the official aesthetic, often composing film scores and pieces designed to appease the regime. But privately, he continued to explore his own musical ideas, creating what he called desk drawer works.
These desk drawer works were a testament to his artistic integrity.
They were these compositions, including the Violin Concerto No. 1 and the Song Cycle, from Jewish folk poetry, were deeply personal, often expressing emotions and ideas that would have been deemed unacceptable by the authorities. The song cycle in particular was a risky undertaking as it tackled the sensitive topic of anti-Semitism, a subject largely taboo in the Soviet Union at the time.
This period also saw Shostakovich thrust onto the international stage, but not on his own terms.
In 1949, he was sent to New York as part of a Soviet delegation to the Cultural and Scientific Congress for World Peace. It was a carefully orchestrated propaganda event designed to promote the image of the Soviet Union as a cultural powerhouse and to counter Western criticism of its human rights record.
For Shostakovich, this trip must have been incredibly difficult.
It was a deeply humiliating experience. He was forced to read pre-written speeches praising the Soviet system and denouncing composers he admired, including Stravinsky, who was living in exile and enjoying a level of artistic freedom that Shostakovich could only dream of.
There's a particularly jarring account of Shostakovich being confronted about his stance on Stravinsky at a press conference. Imagine the impossible position he was in, forced to betray his own artistic beliefs to appease the regime. The weight he must have carried navigating these political complexities while trying to stay true to his art.
It certainly took a toll on him, yet amidst this turmoil, he found solace in his music and in the quiet acts of defiance that allowed him to maintain a sense of self.
The death of Stalin in 1953 marked a significant shift in the Soviet Union's political and cultural landscape. How did this impact Shostakovich's life and work?
There was a period of de-Stalinization, a loosening of restrictions, and a tentative exploration of new ideas. This newfound freedom, though fragile, allowed Shostakovich to revisit some of his desk drawer works and even premiere them publicly.
His 10th Symphony, composed shortly after Stalin's death.
It's often seen as a reflection of this period, a complex and multi-layered work that seems to grapple with the legacy of Stalin's reign.
So there are moments
of profound grief and anger, as well as passages that suggest a tentative hope for the future.
Some musicologists believe the symphony contains musical portraits of Stalin and other figures from that era.
That's right. The second movement in particular is often interpreted as a musical depiction of Stalin's brutal and unpredictable nature. It's a jarring and dissonant movement full of percussive force and an almost palpable sense of menace.
Shostakovich's personal life also underwent significant changes during this period.
He went through 2 more marriages. His second marriage to Margarita Kainova ended in divorce. However, his third marriage to Irina Supinskaya brought him a sense of stability and happiness in his later years.
Despite the thaw in the political climate, Shostakovich continued to push boundaries and explore difficult themes in his work.
His 13th Symphony, premiered in 1962, is a powerful example of this. It's based on Yevgeny Yevtushenko's poem Babi Yar, which commemorates the massacre of Ukrainian Jews by the Nazis during World War II.
This was a controversial subject even after Stalin's death.
The official Soviet narrative downplayed the specific targeting of Jews during the Holocaust, often referring to the victims simply as Soviet citizens. Yevtushenko's poem, and by extension Shostakovich's symphony, challenged this narrative by directly addressing the anti-Semitism that fueled the massacre.
It's remarkable that Shostakovich was willing to take such a risk, given his past experiences with censorship and denunciation.
It speaks to his unwavering commitment to artistic truth and his willingness to confront injustice, even at great personal risk. This commitment is evident in his later works as well. His string quartets in particular are deeply personal and introspective, exploring themes of love, loss, and the human condition.
Shostakovich's final years were marked by declining health.
He suffered several heart attacks, debilitating falls, and a condition that affected his right hand, forcing him to give up playing the piano.
It must have been incredibly difficult for him to lose the ability to express himself through the instrument that had been such a central part of his life.
And yet he continued to compose, almost defying his own physical limitations. His final work, the Viola Sonata, is a testament to his resilience and his enduring passion for music. Dmitri Shostakovich died in 1975, leaving behind a legacy as complex and multifaceted as the man himself. His life and music offer a profound reflection on the relationship between art and power, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring search for truth and meaning in a world often defined by chaos and uncertainty.
His music continues to resonate with audiences worldwide, perhaps because it speaks to something universal about the human experience. It invites us to confront the darkness, to grapple with difficult questions, and to find solace and beauty, even in the midst of suffering.
He was a man who lived through extraordinary times and faced unimaginable pressures, yet through it all, he never lost his voice, his passion, or his humanity. His story reminds us that even in the darkest of times, art can be a source of hope, a testament to our shared humanity and a powerful force for change.
As we conclude this deep dive into the life and music of Dmitri Shostakovich, I'm left pondering one essential question. How can we as listeners, as individuals, navigating our own complex and often challenging world, draw inspiration from Shostakovich's unwavering dedication to his craft and his refusal to be silenced?